The film begins with a hitman named Michael, who is celebrating his 50th birthday at home with his girlfriend Cindy, as he prepares to retire from the criminal organization he works for. However, Michael is unaware that the organization has sent an assassination team to eliminate him. The sniper Fecund, a member of the team, is seen preparing his weapon, aiming at Michael, and then firing a shot that hits him in the shoulder. At the same moment, the rest of the team, consisting of Hilly and Alex, stormed the place and opened fire on him. It then becomes clear that Cindy is also a member of the assassination team and was only pretending to love him to distract him. Before taking his last breath, Michael asks Hilly why he was targeted. She tells him that these are orders from Bolt, the gang leader, and then fires a final shot to finish him off. Shortly after, their teammate Carl arrives and takes them away from the scene. Meanwhile, Hilly informs the sniper Fecund to follow them to the organization's headquarters. Elsewhere, another hitman named Duncan, known as the Black Kaiser, is shown working independently, away from the organization. Duncan is at the hospital undergoing a full medical checkup in preparation for his retirement in 2 weeks when he turns 50. During the examination, the doctor discovers a metal fragment inside his body and informs him that it can be removed, but Duncan decides to postpone the procedure. The doctor asks if he has been taking his medication regularly, which Duncan confirms. When asked about his plans after retirement, he replies that he intends to live a normal life like any ordinary person. After leaving the hospital, Duncan meets with his accountant, who informs him that his retirement payout amounts to $8 million. Duncan requests a donation of $200,000, as he does every year, emphasizing that the donation must be sent to the same recipient as usual, from the same account he always uses. The accountant also tells him that he owns properties in 4 states and asks which address should be recorded in the documents. Duncan requests that his address in Florida be used. Later, Duncan calls a woman named Vivian, a member of the organization, and requests a meeting with her. After ending the call, he destroys his phone's SIM card. When he meets her, he asks for details about Michael's murder. Vivian informs him that Michael is the 4th agent in the organization to be killed this month. She hands him an envelope and tells him that their sources indicate the killer is linked to a Russian gang, which hired a hitman named Pedro. Upon opening the envelope, Duncan sees a picture of Pedro. Vivian tells him that Pedro is currently in Belarus and that Bolt, the organization's leader, has assigned Duncan the task of assassinating Pedro in retaliation against the gang targeting their agents, offering a reward of $1 million. However, Duncan refuses the job, stating that he is already retired. Vivian reminds him that he still has 2 weeks before turning 50, meaning he is still obligated to follow the organization's orders. Ignoring her words, Duncan leaves indifferently. Afterward, Duncan gets into his car and drives to his home in Montana. That night, he falls asleep in his chair while watching TV, but he suffers from a disturbing nightmare, seeing flashes of a murder scene. The next morning, Duncan notices his neighbor, Camila, struggling to split firewood to heat her home, but failing. After a while, Camila leaves to run some errands, and upon her return, she is surprised to find that all the wood has been chopped. Meanwhile, Duncan watches her from his house without her noticing. In the evening, Duncan finds 15 emails from Vivian. He calls her and discovers that Bolt is adamant that he must carry out the mission. Vivian informs him that Bolt has increased the offer to $2 million, with $1 million to be deposited into his account before the mission, and the other $1 million after its completion. However, Duncan ends the call in less than 30 seconds, then destroys the phone's SIM card and replaces it with a new one. Afterward, he calls Vivian again to reaffirm his refusal of the mission for the 2nd time. Vivian tries to exploit her friendship with Duncan, pleading with him to accept the mission for her sake personally. After some hesitation, Duncan agrees and asks her to send the mission details via email, then ends the call in under 30 seconds once again, destroying the SIM card to avoid being tracked. At that moment, Vivian is sitting with Bolt in his mansion, along with Hilly, the head of the assassination team, who is revealed to be Bolt's lover. Hilly asks Vivian why she is so anxious and fearful of Duncan. Vivian replies that Duncan is a highly skilled and intelligent assassin, and any mistake with him could cost them all their lives. It then becomes clear that Bolt is planning to eliminate Duncan, as the mission Vivian convinced him to undertake is actually a trap. The real objective is to kill him. Bolt wants to seize Duncan's retirement payout, which amounts to $8 million. Meanwhile, Bolt is in his office with a group of investors in the organization. It is revealed that he owes the organization $29 million, but he reassures them that he will be able to repay the debt within a year. His words surprise the investors, who ask how he intends to achieve that. He then explains his plan, revealing that many hitmen are approaching retirement age and that there is a loophole in their contracts with the organization that he can exploit. This loophole states that if an assassin dies before reaching retirement age, their severance pay does not go to their family, but instead reverts to the organization. When asked how he intends to ensure their deaths before they reach retirement, he informs them that he has already begun executing his plan to eliminate them all. The investors approve of his scheme. At the same time, Duncan is on a flight to Belarus, where he dozes off and finds himself trapped in yet another nightmare, causing him to wake up startled. Upon arrival, Duncan disguises himself as a maintenance worker and heads to the hotel where Pedro, the target, has been staying. Pedro is throwing a wild party in his hotel suite while Duncan makes his way to Pedro's floor, using a power drill that emits a loud noise. Annoyed, Pedro storms out of his room to confront Duncan, who catches him off guard and pins him to the wall using nails. Duncan then eliminates all of Pedro's men in the room. When he enters Pedro's suite, he discovers a file containing his own picture and detailed information about him, realizing at that moment that the mission was a trap designed to lure him in. Duncan returns to Pedro and asks him who assigned him the task of assassinating him, but Pedro denies knowing any details. Duncan threatens him with the power drill to force a confession, but eventually realizes that Pedro truly has no information. At that point, he shoots Pedro in the head and takes a picture of him as proof of his death. He then calls Vivian, demanding that she transfer the first $1 million to his account. Vivian transfers the amount to Duncan's account, and he calls her again to inform her that the mission is complete, sending her Pedro's photo after his execution. He then demands the transfer of the remaining $1 million. Vivian is shocked by his words and falls silent. Duncan tells her that he hopes she is not involved in the trap set for him because she knows exactly what will happen to her if she is. He gives her 24 hours to transfer the rest of the payment. Afterward, Vivian angrily heads to Bolt and scolds him, saying that she warned him against trying to kill Duncan, but he didn't listen. As a result, Duncan uncovered their plan, killed Pedro, and is now demanding the rest of his payment. Bolt reassures her that he will transfer the money, but at the same time, he decides to assign the assassination team to eliminate Duncan. Meanwhile, the assassination team arrives at an accountant's office and brutally beats and tortures him until he confesses the location of Duncan's file, which contains all the details of his assets and bank accounts. After obtaining the file, they execute the accountant. At the same time, Duncan is at the supermarket near his home, where his neighbor Camila is also present. The store owner tells him that someone chopped the firewood for Camila and asks if he saw who did it, given that he lives close to her. Duncan replies that he didn't see anyone. The assassination team continues searching for Duncan, tracking his property addresses. They head to his listed address in Florida. Cindy knocks on the apartment door, But when it opens, a man other than Duncan answers. The team quickly storms the place and assaults him. The man confesses that he is just a tenant and doesn't know the actual owner, explaining that he deposits his rent into a specific bank account. After verifying his claim, they execute him. The team then moves from one of Duncan's properties to another, only to discover that all of them are rented out. To cover their tracks, they eliminate the tenants to erase any evidence that could lead back to them. Meanwhile, Duncan unexpectedly meets Camilla at a cafe. They sit together and chat. Camilla expresses her love for the city they live in, describing it as peaceful with very friendly residents. When she asks about his job, he tells her that he used to work for a company specializing in funeral services. Due to his work, he has traveled to more than 90 countries and speaks 8 languages. However, he is now retired and lives in solitude and tranquility. Camila is fascinated by his story and suggests that he teach children at school, sharing his experiences about the countries he has visited so they can learn from his knowledge. Duncan initially declines, explaining that he is not good with children, but she eventually convinces him. The next day, Duncan goes to the school and stands in front of the children to teach them some self-defense techniques. He demonstrates his knife-handling skills, impressing and exciting the children, who enthusiastically applaud him. At the end of the lesson, he lets them examine the knife before sitting down to answer their questions. One of the children asks how the dead are buried in India. Duncan recalls a crime he once committed there, but quickly composes himself and responds that bodies are cremated in India. As he leaves the classroom, he meets Camila and tells her what happened, expressing his surprise at how excited the children were when they saw the knife. Camila responds by telling him that she does not like knives. At the same time, Bolt and the assassination team are busy examining Duncan's file. While reviewing the details, they come across receipts for large sums of money. They notice that all the receipts come from the same bank and discover that this bank is located in a small town in Montana. Based on this information, they conclude that Duncan is in that state and decide to head there quickly to eliminate him. Meanwhile, Duncan buys a handgun as a gift for Camila. He tells her that since she does not like knives, he wanted her to try a different type of weapon. However, Camila tells him that she does not know how to use a gun, so he offers to teach her. He takes her to the forest and starts training her, but he is surprised when she becomes nervous while holding the gun. Suddenly, she breaks down in tears and drops it. Duncan approaches her, calms her down, and then takes her back home. Camila tells him that someone caused her severe harm when she was 13 years old, and since then, she has wished to see him in front of her and kill him, making him feel the pain he caused her. Duncan sympathizes with her and decides to buy her a new gift the next day. Meanwhile, Fecund and Carl are watching the bank from inside their car when, by chance, they spot Duncan exiting a store, carrying the gift. Immediately, they inform the rest of the team that they have found him. As Duncan heads back home, he finds Cindy standing on the road, claiming that her car has broken down. She tells him that the mechanic won't be able to come until the next day and asks if she can stay at his place for the night. Duncan agrees and takes her with him. At night, the assassination team puts their plan into action. Fecund positions himself on a high rooftop, aiming his sniper rifle at Duncan. But at the last moment, Duncan notices the laser sight from the rifle. As he tries to dodge the shot, the bullet hits Cindy's shoulder. Duncan quickly grabs his gun and starts firing randomly in all directions. Cindy tries to direct Fecund to Duncan's location, but since Duncan keeps moving inside the house, he surprises her by shooting her directly in the head, killing her instantly. After that, Hilly and Carl storm into the house, but they find no trace of Duncan. Meanwhile, Fecund attempts to locate him using his rifle scope, only to be shocked when Duncan suddenly appears behind him. Duncan lunges at him and kills him. then takes his communication earpiece and assumes his position. He begins shooting at all the light sources in the house before switching on the thermal sensor and the rifle scope. He then addresses Hilly, warning her that fear may take over, but assuring her that he will kill her swiftly and quietly. Hilly tries to distract Duncan by engaging him in conversation, giving Carl the chance to move stealthily for a surprise attack. As he moves, Carl contacts Alex, instructing him to execute the backup plan. When Carl finally faces Duncan, he fires several shots at him, but he is shocked to realize that he has fallen into a trap. Duncan suddenly appears behind him. Duncan shoots Carl's man before demanding to know who sent him. When Carl refuses to answer, Duncan kills him. At that moment, Hilly is left in shock upon realizing that Carl is dead as well. She lights a flare to obscure her location from Duncan, but he patiently waits until the flame burns out. Then, using the sound of her breathing to locate her, he fires 2 consecutive shots and eliminates her. After that, Duncan searches Carl's body and finds the key to the hotel room where they are staying in the city. He hurries there, but finds no one except Alex's girlfriend, who is sitting on the floor extremely drunk. The girl mistakes Duncan for Alex and asks him if he has kidnapped the girl, as Carl had told her. Duncan asks about the kidnapped girl, and she informs him that Alex went to kidnap the girl, for whom he bought a gift. Duncan realizes that Alex is trying to kidnap Camila. Duncan rushes to Camila's house, only to find it destroyed and empty. He angrily returns to the hotel, only to discover that the girl has disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Bolt is furious after the death of Hilly, his lover. Vivian responds calmly, reminding him that she had warned him not to confront Duncan. But Bolt loses his temper, destroying everything around him, and declares that he will show no mercy to Duncan, making him wish for death every day. Later, Duncan goes to his old friend Porter, asking for an explanation about what's going on. Porter tells him that Bolt plans to kill all the old assassins to seize their retirement rewards. Duncan asks where Camila might be held, and Porter answers that she is most likely being held in Bolt's mansion, which is large and contains secret rooms. Duncan thanks Porter and shakes his hand, but he is surprised when Porter places a drugged handkerchief on his hand, causing him to lose consciousness. Afterward, Porter contacts Bolt to inform him that he has carried out the task. When Duncan regains consciousness, he finds himself chained inside a torture room. Bolt tells him that he has only 4 days left before turning 50, and promises to make those 4 days a living hell for him before executing him on his birthday. He then shows Duncan a picture of Camila, claiming that he has made her an addict and will marry her instead of Hilly, whom he killed. Bolt begins torturing Duncan brutally, using pliers to tear into his body, and the next day, he continues his torment, causing serious injuries to Duncan's eyes. On the 3rd day, he repeatedly stabs Duncan, causing the knife to break on a piece of metal inside Duncan's body. That night, Duncan manages to remove the piece of metal from his body and uses it to unlock the chains binding his hands. When Bolt's men enter the room the next day, Duncan is able to eliminate them all. Bolt hears gunfire from inside the room, then notices that Duncan has turned off all the lights in the area, which causes him to panic. He orders his men to storm the room and kill Duncan, then quickly rushes to his office. But as soon as the door to the room is open, Duncan attacks the remaining men and kills them. He then escapes the building, severely wounded from his injuries. Duncan continues walking until he reaches his friend Jasmine's house, where he collapses unconscious. Jasmine takes him in and begins treating his wounds. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself lying on the bed, his body covered in bruises. He tries to stand but falls to the ground, so Jasmine helps him back to bed and gives him a sedative injection to speed up his recovery. After a few days, Duncan recovers and is able to stand again. Jasmine takes him to a warehouse full of weapons, where he selects several heavy arms and places them in his car. After saying goodbye to Jasmine, he sets off to carry out his plan. On the way, Duncan calls Vivian and tells her that he is ready to make a deal, but ends the call without giving any details. Meanwhile, Bolt's tracking devices pick up a signal indicating that Duncan is near the mansion, prompting Vivian to mobilize with a large group of Bolt's men to eliminate him. Duncan arrives at an abandoned warehouse where he prepares the weapons and places them in strategic locations. He then calls Vivian and tells her that the deal will take place the following day at 9 a.m. at the train station. His goal with the call is to extend the conversation and lure them to his location. Indeed, Bolt's men manage to track him down and head toward him, finding him waiting for them. Duncan warns Vivian, offering her a chance to survive, but she mocks him and dismisses his words. At this moment, Bolt's men approach him, and Duncan uses an advanced glove that allows him to remotely control the weapons he had placed around the area. He opens fire on Bolt's men, killing them all. Vivian is shot in the back and falls to the ground, but Duncan leaves her alive and continues on his way. Meanwhile, Bolt sits in his office, watching the events unfold through security cameras and panicking. He gathers all his men inside the mansion, but when they see Duncan approaching the window, they are terrified and flee, leaving Bolt alone. Duncan enters Bolt's office and decapitates him, then heads to the place where Camila is being held. He carries her in his arms and takes her back to his home, where he stays by her side until she recovers. One day, Duncan stumbles upon some old newspapers containing an article about a murder that happened years ago. He realizes that the nightmare that haunts his dreams, the attack he launched on an entire family, killing all its members except for their young daughter, was not just a fleeting memory. He discovers that the girl he left alive was none other than Camila, his current neighbor. Duncan awakens from his memories to find Camila pointing a gun at him, confronting him about what he did to her family, and asking why he killed her parents. Duncan admits that he received incorrect information about the target's location, which led him to commit the massacre of her family. Camila breaks down in tears, telling him that, after years, she discovered that he had been donating money to ensure she had a good life and education. At that moment, Duncan is deeply moved and admits his regret, then asks her to shoot him and take revenge on him. Indeed, Camila shoots him, but she doesn't kill him, as she wanted to know the identity of the person who ordered him to kill her father. Duncan tells her that he doesn't know who it is, but promises her that he will search for him until he finds him. The story ends,